Hey guys, welcome to TST Garage. I'm Bart, and today in the shop with me I have a 2016 and up Yamaha XSR 900. Over the next couple days we will be transforming this bike into a TST spec version. All the parts that you see in front of me will be mounted on this bike, and we will be performing video installation instructions on each and every one of these parts. You can watch each video on our YouTube channel or on our website. I hope we'll see you there. This particular video will focus on the installation of our TST Industries Elite 1 fender eliminator. Now this fender eliminator, when it gets to you, comes in this form. Obviously it's a bunch of parts, kind of like an IKEA setup. We'll show you how to construct this setup out of these components and install it on the bike. Our setup features CNC machined aluminum, black anodized finish, really nice, durable and adjustable setup. All the fasteners are corrosion resistant, made out of stainless steel. Really nice setup. Very cost effective, and it makes the bike look really, really nice. One caveat I have to talk about is that this piece of plastic on the fender will have to be trimmed off. This is sort of an industry standard on this bike. Other companies that have fender eliminators for them, they tell you that you have to trim that off. We will follow along the same way to keep this cost effective and not have to make a lot of hardware. The result looks really, really nice. It looks professional. Nothing to worry there. If you ever want to return this bike to stock, these pieces from companies like Partzilla or MR Cycles, they're really, really cheap. You could probably pick one up for 10 to 15 bucks. No worries there. Anyway, we'll show you the steps in detail. You'll have no issue doing this yourself. When you ditch this behemoth, you're ditching your signals. Actually, on this particular setup, you can reuse these signals, but we thought that this bike deserves a little upgrade. I'll touch on that in just a moment. When you do get rid of this part, you're definitely getting rid of your license plate light. For that reason, we offer these stealth license plate lights. They sit behind your license plate, illuminate it really, really well, but almost disappear behind the license plate. Really nice addition, highly recommend it. We have a separate video that goes into detail on how to install that part. We will be very brief with the installation on this bike since we do have that other video, but we will show you guys how to do that. As I said, we thought that this bike deserves nicer signals. We have a couple different versions of signals. These just seem to look really, really nice with this setup. They're very techy. They go along with the silver and black theme. These are the ones that we're gonna choose to put on this bike. We are gonna capture this in this video. However, this is a separate kit. All these components are sold separately, a la carte. You will be able to add those on to your purchase of this component if you choose to do so. To successfully mount these signals or any of our signals on this bike, you will need a converter kit. It basically covers up the hole left behind by the OEM signal and enables you to put a stud type fastener through it and successfully get your signals installed. Our signals do come with bullet connectors that make them universal. We do offer an optional kit that has bullet connectors on one side and OEM style plug and play connectors on the other side. So we will be making use of this just to make the installation quick, simple, and professional. This is an add-on kit again, so keep that in mind. Anyway, I'm done yapping. Let's start wrenching. So before we start taking off any components, we're gonna mark off where we're gonna cut this plastic fender portion ultimately. The reason why I do it before I do anything else is because I have all the components built on the bike and I can make all of my decisions based on visual cues from the whole bike. The reason why I use painter's tape is because I don't have to commit to anything. If I put it here, I could always replace it. You guys get the idea. So my idea is to take this point and connect it to this point and then run across, and that's how I'm going to trim it. So let's see how that looks. That looks pretty good to me. I'm going to commit to that. Get enough tape on there so that it stays. This fender is symmetrical, so I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And almost done here. Now I can take the seat off and start removing all these components off the bike. We will need to remove the seat latch assembly, and I will be using an 8mm socket to remove these 4 fasteners. Next, we will free the rear lighting wires from their cable management geometry, undo the protective sheath upstream, and proceed to unplug all the connectors. I will start with the signal connectors. These guys are gray and black. We'll pry up on the locking tab and withdraw. Then we'll go on to the license plate light plug. It actually looks like one of the signal plugs, but the male and female parts are reversed. And finally, I will unplug the main taillight 3-wire connector, where I'll press down on the male end's locking tab and pull it out of the female. Now it'll be necessary to remove these 4 fender nuts. I will be using a 10mm socket to perform this step. When I get down to the last fastener, I like to support the fender from the bottom so it doesn't just drop when I free it from the frame. And at this point, all that remains to be done in these removal steps is to carefully extract the wires and plugs from the frame. Now that the fender is off the bike, we can move on to our workbench and tear this assembly down. All right, so let's start disassembling this fender. I'll grab a shop towel, make sure I don't scratch up any nice parts that are going to remain on the bike. I'm going to work from the bottom first. You can see here there are 2 quarter turn fasteners that release this key cover and wiring cover. I'm going to use a small screwdriver to back those out. And then they just have a series of snaps that hold them in. And then once the snaps are out, we're going to push it towards the back of the bike. And this comes out. So now we have access under here. I'm going to undo some of these wire management clips. All right, so here we have 2 zip tie type wire management clips that actually fit into the geometry that we're going to be putting them back onto. I'm going to cut them off and then reuse small zip ties in their place. Let's freeze my signal wires. The signals can now be disassembled. This is done by removing this jam fastener from the rubber boot and just twisting and pulling away. Usually do this for you guys, show you how this works. 2 windows in this rubber boot. This fits through the bodywork or the fender. This jam fastener pops in, has interference fit in those windows that I showed you, and this is what keeps it on. So if you stretch this boot and pop this off, it's really simple. All right, so what's next? At this point, I'm going to want to remove the taillight, 2 10mm nuts right here. And now I can start removing some of this other stuff. I'm going to undo this 10mm nut up here. This enables us to remove this whole bracket. And now we have 4 fasteners here. These fit into rubber well nuts. For proper disassembly, you need a T20 star key. If you don't have one, you can substitute a 7/64 Allen. That'll work just fine. They are not torqued in. They're held in by the preload pressure from the rubber well nuts. Now this piece is free. You can remove it. Put it to the side for now. All right, what's next? We have a number of Allen fasteners. They're all 4mm head. So 6, 10 in total. I'm going to remove those now. I want to show you guys, all of these include these shoulder washers. When you take them out as a pair. These will be reused. Okay, now this thing's starting to come apart real nice for us. There are 4 fasteners here. They require a Phillips bit. All right, now we can remove this bracket from here. Let's just make sure that we don't wreck our tape job. And we have another cable management clip here. This will not be reused, so we will snip it off. Now this bracket is off. We will not be reusing this bracket, so we can put it to the side. And now we're basically up to the point where we can start focusing on cutting the plastic. Now, since this bracket is all loose, we'll move it off to the side as well. So we already marked our cut lines on the side, and then we just need to decide where we're going to cut it up top. I do like to preserve these holes, so I'm going to cut just behind them. I'm going to grab my tape again and give myself the cut line that I'm going to use across. I'm going to leave a little bit of material because it's easier to cut off more than to try to make up for something that we've cut off, and typically there's no going back from that. So now let's figure out what sort of a cutting tool we're going to use. For myself, for this installation, I like to use a disc cutoff wheel. You can use a saw. You could probably use a very sharp utility knife. Anything like that will work for you. I'm going to use this. Always use eye protection. We'll show you that in the next step. All right, so before I cut, I'm going to offer you guys a little bit more detail on how I've marked this rear line off. See the rear holes right here? My initial cut line is roughly 1/4 inch to the back from the edge of that hole. So that's where I decided to start. We're going to chop this and then file it and make it nice. All right, so let's grab some eye protection and let's do this. All right, let's see how we did here. Passing a sharp utility knife over your cut makes the cut look really nice and takes away the burrs left behind by the abrasive wheel. You have to be careful not to bite off too much or to slip and cut yourself. All right, this is starting to take shape. Just going to take a couple more cuts. Now that I have the shape that I like, I can file it to get a really nice edge. So now, once you get your cut edge quality to the level of your comfort, you're ready to proceed to the next step. I did actually work on this a little bit here with the file and the knife and a couple of tools. I got it looking really, really nice. So if you get up close to it, it looks almost like a factory edge. All right. So now it's a little nicer. Let's start reconstructing this guy. This will fit like this, and that will be here holding the light. Then we have alignment between these 6 holes in the plastic piece and all this stuff underneath. So let's get that superimposed. Grab these screws. Remember the screws that we took out of here, 4 were black, 2 were silver. We're going to reuse the silver ones back here. And remember to reuse the shoulder washer. I'm going to get those seated but not tightened down. I want to leave some adjustability here in this system. Now we have 2 here and 2 here, and those were the black ones with the black shoulder washers that we took out towards the end of our disassembly. We are going to replace them. Again, get them seated. And now we can tighten them down. All right. Let's now build our bracket system underneath this thing. It's going to get attached to these 2 holes. We are going to reuse some of the screws that came off this assembly. I really like to reuse these since they fit with our system and they're the native screws that came out of there. So I'm going to hold these in place. If you notice the way they're cut, they're sort of, the geometry looks like it swoops towards one end. We're going to keep the more rounded part towards the rear of the bike. I'm going to discontinue using my power tool. From this point forward, I like to use only hand tools. It's also advised to use thread locking compound on these connections. I'm not going to for the purpose of this video because I'm tearing this bike down afterwards, but I highly recommend using this. Otherwise, the vibration may back out your screws and you may lose your system. All right, so using a 4mm Allen, I'm going to get these screws turned into the hinge bosses until I can't hold them anymore. Then I'm going to grab a 10mm open-ended wrench. And this wrench will hold my hinge boss for me. It'll prevent it from rotating. And the idea is to get these parallel. So you basically want to have these holes that are threaded on the hinge bosses on the same axis, or as close to it as possible. All right, now we're dead center on axis. We'll take these brackets, 2 of the M6 screws and 2 washers. These are 4mm also. So if this is the rear of the bike, we'll have a choice to make. Either place your license plate this way or this way. I recommend this way. I think the other way will have a chance of actually making contact with your wheel, especially if you're in Europe or other countries that have a ginormous license plates. So I recommend that the final assembled product looks like this and your license plate sits on this angle. Now what I've done here is I've aligned the hole in my bracket with a protruding shoulder from one of these hinge bosses, and that locks it on axis, and then we turn the screws in. Do that on both sides. All right, so now one remaining step here in this assembly is to put this bracket on. Obviously, our logo goes upright. We use the countersunk screws provided. I believe they go in the outer holes. Yes, so we will be using the outermost of the 3 holes on each side. Countersunk screw from the outside. M5 flange nut from the inside. And this screwed connection will require 3mm Allen and a 8mm open-ended wrench to tighten down. I leave some adjustability so that I can center it. This step can also be performed at the end, just before mounting the license plate, but given the fact that we have some slot that's present on the L bracket visible through the middle hole, we could kind of just gauge the center or off-center condition of this bracket against those other brackets by how much gap we have. So I'm going to center it right now, get that ready to go, and we'll continue. These particular screwed connections are into a locking nut, so these don't require Loctite, but all the other ones I recommend some sort of a thread locking compound. All right, so for our purpose here, we are done with the construction of this guy. I'll just show you guys the adjustability factor. If you unlock the hinges, it will let you adjust your license plate to whatever angle you want. I'm going to keep it at a neutral angle for now. We'll perform that adjustment at the end. Let's continue with all the other components here. I'm going to start the reassembly here with these screws. These were the ones that require our star key T20. I'll get these guys seated. Once I get them preloaded just a little bit, I'm going to move on to the other component and finalize the tightening a little bit later. So now I have to replace this guy. If you notice, it does have these stamped in protrusions. Those go towards the bottom like this. They're responsible for locking in the forward portion of this key lock shroud. All right, let's flip this guy over, see what's going on here. We've taken off this part. Now, if you guys are gung-ho about keeping a cover on your key lock, then the following steps will have to be performed. We'll have to chop off this portion here, leave the portion that has these snaps, and then we will have to use a wire tie routed through here and around it to keep it in place on this side, and this side will be just snapped in like it was in the OEM setup. So I'm going to perform another cut. I'm basically just chopping off the slender portion. And I'm just going to clean it up with a knife because it's the simplest way to do it. Okay, that looks good now. Let's size it up, make sure everything's good to go before we proceed. So I'm basically just getting the forward snaps underneath those stamped protrusions on that piece that we mounted here. I'll show you guys what it looks like from the outside. They just go in here and slide forward. And once that's locked in place here, the rear snaps just go into that window, and then we'll just pass a wire tie from here into this window on top of this steel component out the other side and zip tie it together, and that'll just hold it in place and let it do its job. So far, this is what we have. Come a long way, looks pretty good. Going to mount the taillight now. All right, here we go. Now we can route our tail light through this wire management clip and up through this window. And this is pretty much ready to go. If we were not installing any signals on this bike, we would just pop this back on, zip tie it in place, and then get this mounted on the bike, be good to go. But for this installation, we are going to do the signals. So we're going to go through that now and then finish with this and then mount it on the bike. So like I told you in the intro, we have a couple different types of signals that you can mount on this bike, but we thought that this setup would be the coolest because it'll match a lot of the other cues on this bike. So we're going to move forward with these. We're going to make use of our adapter kit. All right, so in this kit we have 4 of these plates and 2 washers. These washers sometimes come in handy for installations with these guys that have a shorter stud, and then you don't use one of these plates. So we're just going to put these to the side since we're mounting these and they have really long studs. We're going to take off our hardware, get them prepped. And so the well that's left behind looks like this, and our plates just go over that. The other plate goes from underneath, and the bumped out portion, little dome, that goes inside to center it, and that way you achieve a nice on-center installation without any fuss, and it won't vibrate out of position on you. So, as you can see, one of the flanges is a little bit larger. I'm going to use the larger one on the inside. Smaller one on the outside. Find the right signal, and the way these are identified is basically our logo goes upright. You have to be upside down, standing on your hands to read it. You probably mounted it backwards. It doesn't really degrade the performance. The light spread out of these is directly back and fans out symmetrically from the center plane, but they just look a little wacky if it's upside down. All right, so since this is our right side of the bike, this is our signal. This is vastly easier with 2 people. All right, once I get this thing on there, I'm going to drop a washer onto the connection. Get my nut on here. Once you bottom out the screw, you could use, once you bottom out the nut, use a 14mm open-ended just to preload it a little bit. We'll do a final adjustment on the bike. Just want it not to spin around. So let's do the other side now. It's basically same concept, just on the other side. All right, pretty cool. We're coming along nicely. Now we need to connect our harness converters that convert this type of connector, the bullet connector, to the OEM style. So basically here we're gonna not use the blue wire. I'm gonna fold it over and tape it in place. This is just an extra wire that is used for signals that have a running light circuit, which is not used on the rear of any motorcycle, especially this one. Okay, so let's make our connection. So on the signal, the yellow goes into the brown on our harness converter, and then the black goes into the red. These bullet connectors do have these insulators, but they are free to move around, and during road vibration, when you're riding, it can slip off. This connection can short, so I always recommend to tape these guys in place and prevent any future problems. All right, so once you have a nice tight wind of electrical tape on here, this side's done. Just repeat the steps on this side. All right, so let's pass these guys through this window up top, as ultimately where they will lead into the subtray of the bike. Get them through this cable management clip. Let's get it engaged but not lock it down completely. These are two cable management zip tie clips that I told you in an earlier step I was going to snip off. I cut them flush. They do still allow one of these little cable ties to pass through. And get those in there and around the wire from the signal that is closest. Get it engaged. Do the same on the other side. And now we can lock down on those signal wires all the way. What I'd like to do is make sure that my black sheathing on the wire is butted up against the studs. Now we can fully engage the center one, get it as tight as it'll go. I'm just gonna trim off these guys and then we'll install this piece and then be ready to go on the bike. There you have it. This is what the underside looks like. You have these wires passing through to the center. Those will also get covered by these features on this cover. We can install our cover now. If this is the rear of the bike, this is the forward portion. Has these clips that need to slide in underneath these features. Now we can snap in the rear snaps here into that window I mentioned before. Now our wires are flowing into this piece routed towards the front. And last thing that we need to do here is to secure this in place. I'm going to do that with this large wire tie. Lock this in place. Trim it. And this is good to go. All right, so let's pop this thing back on the bike. We'll first take the signal wires and feed them through the undertail hole up to the top. And then the main taillight plug goes up. And then we have to align these studs back in there. It's basically reverse order of removal. Let's plug in the taillight and plug in our signals. Now on our converters we have white plugs, they're universal, so we will have to power up the bike and find which side's which. I'm going to turn on the right side signal and do a little bit of trial and error. Okay, so I have them backwards. I'm just gonna flip them around. All right, that's right. That's left. As you can notice, we are flashing faster than the OEM rate. This is because these are LED signals and your OEM signals have incandescent lamps in them. They draw more current and the system is designed to notify you that there's a low current draw condition, such as a lamp out, and that causes the signals to flash fast. So if you want to restore a proper flash rate, or if you're going to go with front LED signals as well, that's going to increase this flash rate yet more, and then you'll need to do something about it. We do make a nice LED flasher relay. There's a Gen 2 relay. It pops in place here, replacing the OEM one, same plug, 2-minute installation. We do have a separate video. I invite you to check that out on our website or YouTube channel. And for now, I'll just route my wires here, try to get it as close to the OEM routing as possible. We do have these cable management clips here. I'm going to get all this stuff around, bunch up the wire. That sheath that we disengaged during disassembly, I'm going to make use of that to contain all of these wires and plugs. And now we can make sure that we are level with these signals. And we are. So I'm just going to use my 14mm open-ended wrench to lock them down. Now keep in mind you are tightening steel mechanical fasteners onto a stud that has been overmolded with rubber. All you want to do is preload that rubber with enough force for this to not move around, but you don't want to over tighten it because then you'll rip out that stud that has been overmolded. All right, these are designed with some give. In case you hit something, they will not just crack on you. I'm just checking to make sure that my lens is perpendicular to the ground, and it is. That looks good. And that looks good. So we're good here. We could put on the license plate, and if you guys are going to do a license plate light, I told you I would briefly touch on it. This can be done in combination with all these other parts. When you're routing all those wires through the inside, it can be easier to get your routing right, but it's such a pain to juggle all of these components together. I chose to do it afterwards. I'm just going to snake the wire through, get it out here and wire it up. All right, so we have our wire in. We just need to connect to the appropriate plug there. Our light kit comes with these nice PosiTap connectors to make the installation nice and simple. We just need to find where the OEM license plate light was plugged into. I'm going to choose to snip off the female plug from our OEM setup. This is unnecessary. We've chucked it. We've cut the fender off. So I'm going to make use of this along with our PosiTaps to make a nice plug-and-play connection. The beauty of using these connectors is that you can always unplug and plug back in without a lot of fuss. You need to unplug this, Obviously in this setup, you could yank this whole plug and you're good to go. But on typical setups, we just use these, and you unscrew this, loosen it, and the wire comes out. You can remove your equipment and you could put it right back in. All right, so for this setup, since I didn't just tap into wires and I have to snip them off here, they do leave just a little bit exposed, so I'm going to use electrical tape to insulate that. And now we have a plug and play connection. Let's test it out. There we go. Nice and bright. So now pretty much the remaining step here will be just to get the bulk of the wire distributed here. All right, and that looks good here. So let's now quickly go through the adjustment of the angle. The hinges need to be a little bit loose. So now you can vary your angle to your liking. I highly recommend you guys don't go this way. It might interfere with the tire. So for me, I'm gonna keep it this angle, really nice, and leave very little gap up top. Then I'm gonna tighten down all the way on these hinges, and we'll be good to go here. We did install these T20 screws loosely before. I'm gonna just tighten them up. With these, you have to remember you're going into a rubber well nut. You don't want to over tighten them. You're preloading a rubber component. All right, so now I'll just replace the seat latch plate. That will be the last step. All right, and we are done. All right, Yamaha did not hand us an easy project. This is a little bit more involved than just bolting up parts, but I'm really happy with the results. This looks really, really sharp. The fender eliminator just gets rid of that chunk back here and becomes very minimal, lightweight looking. The entire fender assembly still kind of chunky and full of steel, so we didn't lose that much weight, but we definitely transformed the look of this bike. And in addition, with our signals and license plate light, this package is really, really streamlined and sleek. It really complements the look of the bike. I'm really happy. I actually enjoy wrenching on Yamahas the most out of all brands of bikes. Just love my job. I hope you guys also enjoy our videos. We make them for you, so leave us a comment, send us some email. We love hearing from you. Comments, good, bad, or neutral, we always like to hear it. You could always find more information and multiple photos of these parts and other parts for this bike and other bikes on our website, tstindustries.com. I hope to see you there. Ride safe.